Hello everyone. In today's video we're gonna cover equals versus, those two equal sign and when to use which one. We'll start by creating a nice little project. Let's call this equals demo. We can just make an empty project. That's totally fine. And this is our little project. As always, I like to start by going to project structure, choose a JDK. I should be able to somehow make it default so I don't have to do that every time. Pretty sure that's possible, but I'm gonna do it sometime outside of this video. So we don't have absolutely anything here. That is good. That's how I like it. Let's create, I don't know, source folder or something. Let's throw in there, let's say that it's sources root. And from here on out, let's create some kind of package. And here we create a new Java class. So let's call this, I don't know, runner. And that's our class and our package. You see it. And now we can write something like, oh yeah, PSVM, of course, first. So, hello there. And now that I run it, it works. Good, that's what we wanted. Now that I know that it works, let's cover, like, understand what we're talking about. Let's say we have two primitive variables, int a and int b. If we do a equals b, then it will of course be true. If we do a equals c, it will be wrong. That is to be expected. That will be false. So true and false is what's going to be printed. That absolutely makes sense. And because all of these A, B, C are primitives, and with primitives you have to use this equal sign. In Java, by the way, you only have two equals. I know in JavaScript, maybe some people are coming from JavaScript, you can have three, two, and then there are some differences to them. But in Java, life is simpler. You only have two. So you have two to, you use two when you want to compare, you use one when you want to assign a value. It's that simple. And now you might be thinking, okay, but when sometimes you can use both. How does that work? So with objects, you can use both equals and the equals method. I will show you. So let's say we create one object. I don't know. What object should we use? Let's create a little class so we know what we're talking about. Class box. And inside we'll just say int, I don't know, num of apples. Yeah, actually, we don't have to initialize it to 0 because that's anyways default value of an attribute, but whatever. Different topic. So let's say we have box1 equals new box. Actually, let me give it a constructor so we can initialize number of apples right away. So this one's going to be 1. You can also make it private and final. Actually, I don't want to make it private because I'm going to be accessing it. So 1, box 2 will also have 1, and box 3 will have 2. So same story. And now if we again just grab these and try to do the same thing, let me add some separation here. And we say, does box 1 equal to box 2 or equal to box 3? So if we now call this, you see that both cases are false. Now, you might be expecting, I'll even comment this out to not confuse you. Now we're talking about this, right? So you might have expected for Java to be smart enough and be like, hey, Java, what the hell? Don't you see that they have the same amount of exactly the same properties? No, Java is not that smart. Computers are in general not that smart. They will not make any decisions for you. And which is a very good thing because the day computers start making decisions for you, we get, Skynet, and there are a couple of movies made about it. So essentially, computer always needs you to tell it exactly what are the rules are, and without it, it just follows some default rules. And the default rule is the equals equals will only return true for objects if it's exactly the same object. What do you mean exactly the same? Literally itself. That's the only condition. And I will even, like do something so that you guys can really see what I'm talking about. Um, so actually, let me just do this. This was box 1 was box 2. Box 1 was box 2. Box 1 was box 3. Brackets are important, by the way. Otherwise, everything will be treated as string concatenation. So, anyways, so you see, it's only true when it's literally the same object. And I mean literally the same, right? It has to be exactly it. Same memory address, same object. You cannot try to say, oh, but it has I don't know. Even if somehow magically you get the same hash, it's still not gonna work. Like I'll show you. Let's produce a hash code. Yep. Yeah. So now they will produce the same hash code, like you can see. That's out box 1 hash code. So you can see that box 1 has the same hash code. Oh yeah, I should have added some space. My bad, so that you guys can see what I'm talking about. Box 1 and box 2 have exactly the same hash code because they have exactly the same amount of apples, and that's what our hash code is based on. And still, it will not produce true. It's literally will only produce true if it's exactly the same object. Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to be really clear about this. You cannot hack your way around it. The standard implementation only works if it's exactly the same object true. For everything else, it's false. There is a little bit of an exception with strings, uh, but I will get to that in a second. So then you might be wondering, also there's an exception with also wrapper objects. Oh man, it's so hard to explain anything nowadays. Everything has 10 different exceptions. Okay, we will cover everything one by one. In general, that's why we don't rely on equals equals, pretty much never, with objects. We always use the equals method. So what we do is instead, we wouldn't want to do this. Like literally, this is so to say is useless. Just a sec. I'll delete this because we don't need it. This equals, like programmers cannot rely on it at all. And what we do instead is we do, maybe let's do it like this. Okay. Equals, yeah. And now, apparently I missed something. But give me a second. I don't want to implement this yet. And now a big surprise. We didn't achieve anything. Equals still works exactly stupidly as this one. Why does that happen? Well, because Java needs you to tell it. Let me just make it a bit brighter. Java needs you to tell it how exactly should the equals work. If you do not define equals, it uses the default equals that it inherits from the object class. And that one, big surprise, acts exactly the same as the stupid equals equals. So you're probably thinking, what the hell? This is stupid. Yes, you're right. It's stupid. But again, what did you want? Did you want Java to make decisions for you? Yeah, we covered that. That results in uh, pretty cool movies, but probably not the best things for the humanity. So essentially, Java needs you to tell it how should it do equals, because maybe you have here two different attributes. Uh, Type of apples. Man. So final string, for example, and maybe so should Java now do it only based on number of apples? Is it equal only if the number of apples is the same, or is it equal when both of them are the same? Like how should Java know? And that's why what we do is we usually override it equals and hash code. And we choose, I mean, IntelliJ is very useful, but I will just show you how to do it without IntelliJ. Basically, it's very simple. Yeah, you can literally just override it. There's a if you press Control O or Command O, you get this override thingy pop-up window, and you can choose which method from object you want to override. And I want to override equals. It's basically a method that accepts any object, not of the same type, but any object, and it returns true or false. And this is where you define your logic. And I just want to have a very simple logic. I say if object, and I'm gonna have instance of the same class, which is box class, or so it works like this back. And then and let's just do this. And I will keep it simple. I know I could have used pattern matching, but I just want to keep it simple for beginners. Um, or actually, let's make it even simpler. Yeah. So if it's the same instance, then I cast it first. Box 2 equals box object. Oh, what am I doing? Sorry, I forgot how to write code by now. So, and then I say return box2 dot num of apples equals box, I mean, this dot num of apples, right? Otherwise, just return false. So does that make sense if it's the same instance? If not, where I immediately return false, it's not even a box, maybe it's, I don't know, string or whatever. But if it's the same object, the same class, I mean, if it's the same class, then we check, we cast it, and then we check that the number of apples is the same. And then that's our logic. And now if we follow that logic, all of a sudden, our equals method becomes useful. And those two boxes, box 1 and box 2, become equal, true, because they have the same amount of apples, and we defined our equals logic to be based on that, right? So often we just allow IntelliJ, I just want to show you IntelliJ to generate it. We press generate equals, then we say which ones we want. For example, I only want to do equality on number of apples the way I did it. And IntelliJ, well, first of all, it does few little additional checks for null. I forgot to check for null. And but essentially it's the same thing as I wrote. This is just a shortcut, kind of redundant, but yeah, it's just saves you some performance. And that is pretty much it. So now you know how equals method works. And now let's cover some exceptions. Exceptions is a string pool. So for example, Java decided some time ago, the developers of Java correctly decided that every single program produces a lot of strings. So every time you do this, we just produce a string. String is an object, so it goes and gets saved in memory. And very often we keep reusing the same values in program. And that's why Java decided that as long as you just produce strings using quotes, let's call this, I don't know, string 1, string 2, let's call this apple and apple, Java will reuse the same object from memory. So when you second time use the word apple, Java looked up, it's called pool, like in its string pool, but basically in its cache. It looked up in its own internal cache if this already has been used, and if so, then it just reused the same object. It's done to improve performance. So now I'll just comment out everything we've done till now. So now we just have this, and if I run it, it will say true. And if I run equals, it will also say true. So now you might, because for equals also is correctly implemented in string, like that, it correctly compares the characters. So both of them result in true. So you might start thinking, okay, so for strings, if I understand you correctly, I can just use this, which is a bit shorter and faster to write. No, you shouldn't. I'll explain why. It is true that Java will do its best to reuse the same object, but Java cannot guarantee that. For example, again, remember what I said about machines not being very smart or not making decisions. Uh, this results in the same thing, but Java might or might not, depending on the. I think it's for super easy calculation it might actually work, but for a bit more complicated calculation, 1 will not equal 3. Let's see if this calculation is simple enough. Sorry. So this calculation is simple enough. Cool. But if I do something like, I don't know, 0 till 1, 2, 3, 4, so 3, 4, right? So I want 0, 1, 2. I don't want the index 3 limit. Yeah. You see, even though I'll just print it so you guys get it, 3 and 1, and let me just print 2. All of them are exactly the same value. You see, they're all 3 apples, exactly the same. As soon as I tricked the system. So some super simple thing is that Java is smart enough to calculate that it's the same thing. It didn't work. But as soon as I added substring, which is a bit more complicated calculation, Java kind of said, yeah, okay, I give up. I have no idea what the string is. We're going to build it in runtime. And because it's being created in runtime, uh, like it didn't reuse the internal value. It just created this value in runtime, and 1 equals 3 is no longer true. I'll just show you so you guys see exactly that it was 1 equals 3. That was not true. What just happened? Oh, wait. I'm a bit confused. What's happening? Are we in the same program? Does anyone understand this? Right, yeah. So, basically, you can see that even though all 3 are exactly the same value, you cannot always count on that because 3 has been created a bit more different, like, it was a bit more complicated calculation. You cannot count on Java to always correctly foresee it. And that's why we programmers just don't bother with trying to calculate which one of them will work. It's very simple for us. Whenever it's an object, you use equals. With objects, you have a choice. You can use 1 or, yeah, sorry, it's now equals, not that. Or maybe I should have, just so it's very clear. Um, so you can see equals returns true because it looks at the actual amount of like which characters are inside and correctly like compares all the characters for strings. By the way, equals for strings is already implemented. We don't need to implement it ourselves. And it correctly compares all the characters. That's why we do not try to be smarter than Java. See, it's even IntelliJ even warns us. We just simply we just always simply use equals with objects, and that's it. And then we don't have to worry about it. And with primitives, like I showed before, I think I deleted ABC, but I'll just put them back. With primitives, we also don't have a choice, so there's nothing to think about. There is primitives don't have an equals method. That's like, there is no method to call. Like, so with primitives, you don't have a choice. You always use equals equals, and because primitives don't live in some memory address, they are always there by, compared by value. So there is nothing to worry about. Primitives always work correctly. That's not a problem. It will print 2 times true at the beginning. And there are just a little reminder. There are 8 primitives in Java. You should know them because byte, short, char, int, and then long, float, double, boolean. So those are the 8 primitives of Java. There are no other primitives. And for them, you always use compare. I mean, what am I saying? Like you compare them by this double equals primitive comparison, because that's pretty much your only choice. And for objects, you have both options, but you always go for equals method. Okay, it's that simple. You just don't think about it. For primitives, we always use this. For objects, we use equals method because we cannot count on this working correctly. Even if there are some exceptions, like I said, because usually it only works for itself. But even if there are some special use cases like strings or integers, by the way, like wrapper objects for primitives, they also have a little bit of cache, or I don't know how to say it, like for certain set of values, it will work correctly. For larger values, it won't work correctly. So I'll just show you since I spoke about it. I'll just comment everything out. Right. Let's just go here. Integer a equals 10. I think int bint equals 10. Cint equals, I don't remember what was the value, but let's just go 2000 dint. So it will work correctly for a int with bint. It will not work correctly for cint and dint. And the reason is I forgot exactly. I think actually it's 128 or something, the cache, or I mean the range of values where it correctly does it. I honestly forgot. I think it's 128. Let's just check. But from certain value, it just doesn't work correctly. So 128 it already doesn't work, but 127 maybe. Uh, yeah, you see till 128 it correctly works. But so you can, you might make a mistake and try to compare it to integers with equals equals, and it might work for small value. But again, you cannot rely on it. So if you want your program to function correctly, it's very simple. For all objects, you use equals, and equals works correctly. Again, it's already implemented for stuff like for classes from Java, for integer and stuff, and integer and string and all the others. Yeah, but for your own classes, you have to implement it. Otherwise, you don't have it implemented. Because whenever you write a class, if you want to compare it, but if you want to use equals on it, you have to implement your own equals. But my point is, when to use which one? Very simple. With primitives, there's nothing to think about. You only have one choice. You don't have a method choice. And they're compared by value, so they work correctly. For objects, you have to use you have to, yeah, you should use equals, but basically you have to, because the small equals is absolutely unreliable. pretty much in most cases it won't even work correctly, but even in some cases that it will work correctly, you can still not count on it to always go correctly. So it's very simple. For objects, use big equals. Okay, I hope that was helpful, and see you next time.